You could start a podcast with 99 other people. If you do 8 episodes, more than 50% of those people are no longer there. You just lost 50% of the competition. If you're still around by 50 episodes, only 9% of the people that started with you are still there. And then if you get to 100, there's only 5%. That is why podcasting is, on average, it takes 2 years and 100 episodes released before podcasters see results. Really think about that. Chances of reaching that milestone, 9.24%. 91% of podcasts never cross 50 episodes. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode, a deep lesson every podcaster needs to hear. Today, for episode number 138, is podcasting really too saturated for you to succeed? If you're anything like me, you have heard many, many times, podcasts are too saturated. There's too many shows. There's not enough listeners. There's no point in starting one because there's way more podcasts than there are listeners. I think last time I checked, there were 33 million YouTube channels. That's a lot of YouTube channels. There are far, 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 far less podcasts. And there's still people creating YouTube channels that are successful. So odds are that you can also make a podcast that's successful. So the inspiration / data from today's episode is from Podmatch. So if you don't use Podmatch, it's a great service. Again, I'm not sponsored or affiliated with them in any way. But if you do use Podmatch and you go to the website and you go to education and then you go to industry report, you'll be able to see what I am sharing today. So shout out to Podmatch and the creator, Alex Sanfilippo, for this data. They do this every month. Super helpful. And there's a lot of lessons. There's a lot of good lessons in here, and I kind of want to dive through it today. So this is not my report. I didn't come up with this data. I cannot take credit for it. I just want to speak on it in hopefully a clear manner that will help us all learn a little bit and become a little bit more aware and clear and maybe believe a little bit more. Okay, so this is for February 2025. I think it's probably the month prior, so I think it's probably January 2025 since this came out the first week of February. So a couple thoughts. There are 4 categories in the top. There's overall industry buzz, podcasters' health, listenership health, and podcasting opportunity. The overall industry buzz is essentially how well is the word and the phrase and the industry podcasting doing. It's very high. Podcasts are trending at 92% on search engines, up 4% from last time they did this report, which I'm guessing is December of 2024. Podcasters' health. Here's the interesting thing. Extremely high failure rate with limited clear success paths. Okay, we're going to dive into that. Listenership health, very high. There's 584.1 million podcast listeners estimated for 2025. It's a lot. A lot of people. And that's up 15.6%. And then the podcasting opportunity is very high. There's never been a better time to start a podcast. Okay. What I really want to show is probably the number one thing. So podcast listenership is rapidly increasing. I think for the first time ever, the majority of people in the U.S. have listened to a podcast. I think it's more than 50%. But podcasts are slowing down, the creation and or success of them. So if we think of, and again, this is the data from this report, there are 2.757 million podcasts out there in the world, right, that have been created. 2.757 million. So a little less than 3 million. Right now, there are only 383,000 of them that are active. And I do believe active in this case means dropped an episode in the last month. Really think of that. When people say it's too saturated, they're saying because, 3 million, there's 3 million podcasts, or there's 4 million, or there's 5 million. No. There is a very, very small percentage of those that are actually still going. So if we were to do the math on that, which I'm not going to do, it's probably like, I don't know. Oh, yeah, it says right there, 14%. Only 14% of the total podcasts are active. You're not competing with 3 million. You're competing with 383,000. And that's a very, very, very different number. Podcasting is not saturated. The amount of people that start podcasts is probably intimidating, right? Especially during the pandemic, a ton of people started podcasts. Most of those people are not doing it anymore, unfortunately. Or, for you, fortunately, if it helps you build belief. So I think most of what people are thinking is that number, that 2.7 million. We're just going to say 3 million because it's easier to say. Just like I started this episode at the top by saying I believe there are 33 million YouTube channels. How many of those are actually active? That's a completely different thing. Let's do a little Google here. We're going to do a Google Live. How many YouTube channels are active? Okay. Let's see. Will it say? Yeah, it's gonna be Jeffed. The whole thing is gonna be mangled, most likely. I can't give you good data. Here's the reason, too. I don't want to just throw something out there and it be wrong. But what I'm seeing is it looks like there are, it says 114 million active YouTube channels. I don't know if I believe that. Okay. This was as of April 2023. It is estimated that 65 million YouTube channels are currently active and uploading at least one video per month. So even if we went by that, that's like 50%, a little bit more than 50%. Again, I don't know if I believe that, so don't take any of what I said as facts. All I mean by that is it's going to be less people doing it than actually signed up. Another really good example, the gym memberships. Planet Fitness, their literal business model is to get people to sign up and then never come back and then charge so little that you just don't care about it. And it's too much of a pain in the ass to go to the local Planet Fitness and cancel, so you just let them charge your card $9.99 a month. So they might say that they have 10,000 members. That doesn't mean that when you go to the gym, it's going to be swamped every time, because a lot of those members don't come. Same thing with podcasting. So this is one of the most common things I hear. I talked to somebody recently. I did a podcast breakthrough session with someone who didn't necessarily want to start a podcast. They just wanted to get some data, and it was interesting. And they said that. They're like, well, isn't it saturated? No, it's not saturated. I think the expectations are off, because here's the other, okay, this is the other side. Just because it's not overly saturated does not mean you're going to win right when you start. That's the other thing. That's the other piece that's really challenging. Okay, here's another thing. So this is another stat. So the 3 million podcasts out there, 383,000 of them are active. The next stat is independent interview-based podcasters. So in this suggestion, these are non-celebrity, independent, interview-based podcasts with 100+ episodes and a release cadence of 10 days or less. So essentially, they're dropping an episode at a minimum of every 10 days. These are not celebrity. I don't know how they quantify that necessarily. And they have 100+ episodes, okay? So there are only 117,000 of those active out of 540,000. So there's only 22% of those shows that are active. And there's only 6% of independent podcasters that are considered actively established. And that goes to what I was talking about above. They have more than 100 episodes, and they release an episode on average every 10 days or less. So there's only 35,000 of them. If you've ever been to a baseball game, like a professional baseball game, there's most likely more than 35,000 people in that stadium. Imagine those are the people you're competing against, but all over the world and all over the country, wherever you live. It's not that many. It's really, really, really not that many. Now, again, are these interview-based versus solo, yeah, there's some differences in here, but I really want to make the point that I think one of the easy excuses for people to use that they might pass on to you is, yeah, it was just too saturated. We couldn't build an audience. There's just too many other podcasts out there. That's not true. That's not true. That's just an excuse that a lot of people make that might be creating resistance or limiting beliefs or fear or imposter syndrome within yourself, and that's not fair to you. Here's the truth of it. Chances of success and failure as a podcaster. Okay. On average, and again, these, I don't know exactly where these stats came from. Again, it's in the report. I'm not sure. I'm guessing probably Buzzsprout is probably where they came from. On average, it takes 2 years and 100 episodes released before podcasters see results. Really think about that. 2 years, 100 episodes released. That is a commitment right off the bat. So if you're 14 episodes in and you feel like you suck, you are not alone, and in 86 episodes, something might happen. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to take that long. It doesn't mean it's going to happen right after you hit 2 years and 100 episodes. I think it's just a really good thing to look at from an expectation standpoint. Okay. So I'm going to read off episode milestones and the chances of reaching that. And again, this is all in the report, podmatch.com/report. Shout out to Alex. Episode milestone, 8 episodes. What are the chances of crossing 8 episodes recorded? Think about it right now. 100 people start a podcast. How many do you think get past 8 episodes?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hurwitz. So last year, I wanted to quit everything. I wanted to throw in the towel. I wanted to hang up my microphone. And Kevin said no. Kevin said, keep going, Jen. You've got this. And oh my God, I'm going to cry. And I did. Coaches need coaches, y'all. And working with Kevin has been one of the best experiences of my life. Oh my God, I'm crying. Kevin, you are the best. I could not do this without you. And thank you. Thank you for being you and the amazing human that you are.
In this case, the chances of reaching 8 episodes is 44.54%. So that means 55 and a half, but we'll say 56 out of every 100 podcasts do not make it past 8 episodes. More than half. Next milestone, 50 episodes. Chances of reaching that milestone, 9.24%. 9%. So that means 91% of podcasts never cross 50 episodes. How wild is that? 91 out of 100 don't cross 50 episodes. That is a huge, huge, huge stat. 100 episodes, 5%. So the chances of reaching 100 episodes are 5%. So that means 95 out of every 100 people have already given it up there. And then obviously it kind of decreases as you go on. 200 episodes, it says 2.4%. And then 300 episodes, it says 2.76%. I don't know how 300 can be a higher chance than 200. I'm not sure. I'm not good enough at math to know that. But so I want this to kind of be empowering. But it might not be. My goal is to make it empowering. I said this to our group coaching group the other day. Shout out to Voices Unleashed. I said, look, we're 1,977 episodes in. Of course we're going to be somewhat successful. Most people just don't make it as long as we have. We had to find a way. We had to figure it out. We had to learn. We had to grow. We had to innovate. We had to get creative. We would have died a long time ago if we didn't figure it out. But what are the odds of getting to 1,977 episodes? I don't know. Less than 1%, right? I mean, just look at the numbers. It's probably, I don't know, 1% of 1% maybe. It's just a very, very small number of people. Just like if you've been exercising for like 15 years, you're probably in pretty good shape. Just because most people don't do it for that amount of time. I would say maybe you've been married for 15 years. Most likely your marriage is better than the average. I don't know if that's true because there's a lot of things that go into that. But if you've been speaking to groups for the last 15 years, you're probably statistically a better speaker than almost anybody around you, just because you've been doing it for so long. So there's something to that. Now, again, this episode is not about the likelihood of failure. This is about the fact that podcasting is not saturated. That shows you why. You could start a podcast today with 99 other people. Let's keep the math easy. If you do 8 episodes, more than 50% of those people are no longer there. You just lost 50% of the competition. If you're still around by 50 episodes, only 9% of the people that started with you are still there. And then if you get to 100, there's only 5%. That is why podcasting is not too saturated. That is the reason right there. The other reason is there's something about accessibility. So yes, big shows will always get listens. Sure. They have a lot of money behind marketing. They have nice studios. They have access to big guests, all that stuff. Yes. But you're probably never really going to feel like you know that person at a really deep level. And they don't seem accessible to you. So let's imagine there is a podcast like this one, except the person is like just the most famous in the space. Maybe Pat Flynn. Pat Flynn might be a good example, but Pat Flynn's really good at great content, but he's really good at being relatable. So it might not land the same, but let's say you listen to a bunch of his episodes and you say, you know what? I kind of want to work with him. Let me go figure out how much it is. And then you look at the pricing and it's 5 times more than you can afford. I'm not saying it is. I don't know what Pat Flynn charges, so don't suggest that that's what I'm saying, but just as an example. And then you realize, oh man, I've been consuming this person's content for a long time, but I can't really go anywhere else. Like, yeah, I can join the Facebook group and I can do that, but that's kind of the end of it, right? I can't afford to attend an event. I can't afford this. I can't afford that. Versus a smaller show that seems as valuable, that is more realistic to connect with and seems more accessible. Somebody booked a podcast breakthrough session based on listening to this show. I jumped on a call with them last night. We chatted. They said, hey, I have a budget of X amount. Is there anything we can do? I said, yep, we can do everything that you're looking for. Boom. Email, here you go. Let me know if you have any questions. They emailed me back today saying, I have a couple questions, but I should be good to start this month. I don't know if it would work the same with a big show. So there is something to be said about the accessibility and the proximity of a smaller indie show. I really like the fact that this report is put together based on smaller indie shows. Because again, we're not playing the same game as these really big shows. Even we're not. Yes, we make a good amount of money in the business. Yes, we have a budget for editing and all that stuff. Yes, that's all true. And yes, it's probably more than the average podcaster. Yes. But we're not sinking thousands of dollars into each episode. We're not sinking thousands of dollars to get guests flown in potentially. We're not sinking thousands of dollars to fly out to guests. It's different. I would still consider us very much an indie podcast because we're doing solo episodes and we're not really playing the game. I'm not trying to play the game. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. But we're indie podcasts too. So this applies to us as much as it applies to you. It probably applies to you more because maybe you're earlier in and maybe you're 8 episodes in saying, wow, this isn't going to work. Don't quit because it's definitely not going to work. Maybe you're 50 episodes in. Don't quit. Sit down and figure out what have you learned so far about yourself. Lessons, I'm sure, are abundant there. Maybe you're 99 episodes in. You're saying, I'll give 100 a try, see what happens. Just because you cross 100 does not mean there's going to be a line out the door of people that want to work with you or whatever it is. You still got to get creative. I think the assumption with this is by the time you're 100 episodes in, you've already had an opportunity to hopefully build some level of community. Now, again, I'm not saying it's going to be 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million. I'm not saying that. But you've been doing it long enough where you kind of have an understanding of what you're doing. You've probably built up some momentum. You've learned a ton of lessons. You've probably met some people and built relationships with them, not just the audience, but guests, other shows, that type of stuff. And maybe now you feel like you have enough demand to start making money. I think that's why the 2 years, 100 episodes is such a milestone. Because you just learn so much. In order to survive 2 years in the space, you kind of have to learn. But now it's time to get creative with business and sales and that type of stuff. And I think that's where a lot of people just kind of get lost. They assume that when you cross a certain threshold, people are going to just reach out all the time. I can't tell you. I'll tell you this. And I don't know that most people would tell you this because I think it kind of loses credibility, but it's the truth. Drastically less people than you think have listened to this show and then just cold booked a podcast breakthrough session. Whatever the number you think it is, divide it by 10. And that's probably an accurate number, depending on what you think. It's not what most people think it is. And that's why it's not saturated. It's not saturated because people come in with misaligned expectations. They get 8 episodes in, they get 50, they get 100, they get 200, and they realize, oh, this isn't it. This isn't the thing that I thought it was going to be. Or the detriments of this are way higher and way more than I thought they were going to be. I didn't realize I was going to have to post on social media consistently. I didn't realize I was going to have to find guests all the time. I didn't realize that I was going to have to prep for interviews, right? There's just so much more to it. So here's the thesis. This is the wrap up. This is the too long didn't listen, the TLDL, too long didn't listen. Podcasting is not saturated. Yes, the amount of people that start podcasts is a lot and can seem intimidating. The majority of those people will not be around at the end of the month. An even larger majority will not be around by the end of the year. And in 2 years, almost none of them will exist. Sad truth. And this is held true for me too. When we first started, 2017, 2018, 2019, we were doing a lot of masterminding with other podcasters. I'm telling you, most of those podcasters are not podcasting anymore. Like the vast majority of them are not podcasting anymore. Maybe 1% of those people are still podcasting. It's just kind of the way the math works. The difference is you have to be in it for the long run. The closer you get to the top, the less saturated it is. The more depth the more value you provide over a long enough period of time, the less saturated it is. It just feels like it. It just feels like it. Here's the other thing too. If you're a podcaster, you are in the vacuum of podcasting. You assume everybody and their mother has a podcast. People make jokes about it. They make fun of it. Maybe everybody and their mother has started a podcast. That does not mean they are continuing. I've had a lot of things I've started in the past that are no longer here. They are no longer running. I've moved on. I failed at them. I decided they weren't aligned, whatever it is. So that's not necessarily accurate in terms of helping us create our expectations. Okay. So I hope this is empowering. Again, I know the chances of success and failure as a podcaster, that's maybe not super empowering, but I want you to have accurate expectations. This will not be easy, but I do believe it will be deeply meaningful and very rewarding. And if it's not, then it's not for you, and that's okay. I don't ever want to be that person who says everybody should have a podcast, every business should have a podcast, and you should do 1,000 episodes. That is just not true. There are some of you out there that podcasting isn't for you. I hope that's not you. And my hope is that maybe that person wouldn't have listened to 100 and some odd episodes of this podcast, right? Because they would have decided earlier on. But I said that to somebody the other day. I said that to a client. I said, look, this might have been started so you could practice using your voice to help inspire other people, or maybe you needed this for yourself and you just didn't know it. That might not be the next chapter. And that's okay. That's okay. So that's a whole nother piece of it. Maybe we'll do an episode maybe we'll do an episode on that at some point. That would be a sad episode, but how do you know when it's time to hang up the mic? I mean, that's a very real conversation. And I've had that with a lot of people. I've said that to people. Look, this just isn't for you. This just isn't, it's doing more damage to you than it's worth. You're putting in more time than you want. You're just not fulfilled. It's an experience that you just don't enjoy. It's probably not for you. So yeah, maybe we'll do that at some point. I don't know. But It's not saturated. There's a lot of room for you, but you got to be here in a couple of years. If you think the first 10 episodes, it's going to be it for you, and you're going to crush it, and you're going to be at the top, that most likely isn't going to happen. And then it's going to feel like it's saturated, but it's not. Everybody starts the hike at the bottom. Very few people make it to the top. That's the challenge. That's the allure of the journey. I don't know the stats, and I'm not going to look it up because of I looked up the YouTube stats, and that didn't help. But how many people have intended on climbing Mount Everest, and how many people have actually made it to the summit? A percentage, I'm sure. Podcasting is a similar thing. Right? Obviously, you're not risking your life, although it does feel like it sometimes. All right, cool. If you are looking for a group of podcasters, and full disclosure, I have been messing this up, and I have not been posting in our Facebook group as much as I want. There's just been a lot of business things that have popped up that I've had to take care of, and growth is a good thing, but it's also an overwhelming thing. But we have a Facebook group called Podcast Growth Nation, and I won't lie and say I post in there every day because I've been messing up, as I said, but it's a really great group of humans. When I started it, I invited personally a bunch of podcasters that I thought would be a good fit. And I have to assume if you're listening to this show, you're most likely heart-driven and you're most likely a good person. I hope. If so, this group's for you. Yeah, if you're a lonely podcaster, if you feel like you're doing it on your own and you could use some positive people around you and some positive lessons or whatever it may be, join the group. I'll have the link in the show notes. Totally free. It's private. You will be safe in there to share your podcast experience. And if you are feeling stuck in some way, shape, or form, you want to focus on a certain thing, you're looking for a certain strategy, I am offering free 30-minute podcast breakthrough sessions. As always, I will have the link down below. Bring whatever questions you got. We can jam. And yeah, I'm sure you'll get more value behind the scenes when it's something very specific as opposed to a podcast episode. You're a podcaster, you know. You can only be so specific in front of so many people because only so many people are going through such a certain thing. So I'll have the link in the show notes for that. I hope after this episode you don't feel like podcasting is saturated, because if we just look at the data, it's not. It feels it, but it's not. So that's a logic versus emotion conversation, and we can do that at a later time if you would like. Just let me know. As always, keep on crushing it. Keep on podcasting. And I will talk to you all next week.